On the day I found out that my own son had cancelled my bank account without telling me, I had exactly 50 reais in my wallet. With that money, I had to choose between buying my blood pressure medicine or food for the week. In that same week, the phone rang, and a serious voice told me that the company where I, to quote, had worked my entire life wanted to settle an old pending matter with me. I had no idea that this check would make my son kneel in front of me. I'm glad you're here. Stay with my story until the end and tell me from which city you're reading this so I can see how far my story has gone. My name is Lucy. I'm 68 years old. I've been a widow for more than 10 years, and I've always seen myself as a simple woman, but honest and hardworking. I spent 40 years of my life in the same company, clocking in at 7 in the morning, often leaving after regular hours, believing it was all worth it because I was building a better future for my only son. I'm not rich. I never was. But with a lot of effort, I managed to get a little stability, a modest, paid-off apartment, some old furniture, and a pension that barely covered the bills. The rest I trusted into the hands of the person I loved most in this world, my son. His name is Raphael. From the day he was born, I lived and breathed for him. He was the kind of boy I dressed in the best clothes I could afford, even if I was wearing the same worn-out shoes for years. When his father died, just before Raphael turned 10, I stood in front of the coffin and swore that my boy would never lack anything. And I kept that promise. I worked double shifts, accepted overtime, took side jobs selling cake outside the factory. If you ever walked past a tired-looking mother carrying heavy bags, you might have crossed paths with me without knowing it. I always insisted on paying for good schools for Raphael, encouraging English courses, college, everything. I never had. When he graduated in business administration, I cried as if it were my own graduation. I looked at him in his suit and tie and thought, it was worth it. He'll take care of me when I can't anymore. I wasn't expecting money from him. I expected care, respect, presence. At least, that's what I believed I had raised him to give. Over time, he advanced in his career, moved to a nicer neighborhood, started wearing expensive watches, talking about investments and the financial market. He said money, sitting still is dead money. And little by little he convinced me to let him organize my finances. I, who had never trusted strangers with my money, handed everything to my own son, thinking I was safe. He used to say, "Mom, let me handle it. You don't need to worry about anything, just your health." And I would smile, thinking it was beautiful to see the roles reversed, the son taking care of the mother. The company where I worked my whole life was also a huge part of my story. I started there, young, almost a girl, as a cleaning assistant, and I left as an administrative assistant, never once staining my badge with anything wrong. I saw bosses come and go, colleagues being fired, people climbing over others to get ahead. I never did that. I was always the one who took home leftovers from the company party, embarrassed but grateful. When I retired, they put together a simple little farewell, some cake and soda. They gave me flowers and a handshake. I left that company feeling my mission was accomplished, even with all those late nights and extra hours that were never really paid the right way. At least, that's what I thought. Years went by, and my life shrank into a small routine. Wake up early, make my coffee, go to the market when I could, go to church on Sundays, call Raphael to see if he was okay. He didn't always answer. He said it was the rush, meetings, trips. When he came to visit, he was always in a hurry, always with his phone in his hand. "Mom, just sign here real quick. It's just something from the bank, to make things easier." I signed. I trusted him. I never imagined that, in some of those papers, I was giving him the key that would leave me without a cent in my own account. Until that day came. I woke up on a Saturday, went to the store with my little purse, like I always did. I picked up rice, beans, a bit of meat, vegetables on sale, and the medication I needed from the pharmacy next door. At the checkout, when I swiped my card, the cashier frowned. "Ma'am, there's a problem with your account." I laughed nervously. "It must be the system, dear. Can you try again?" She tried again. Declined again. I felt a strange stabbing in my chest. Not just fear, but humiliation. People behind me started getting impatient. I ended up paying with the money I had in my purse, a 50 reais bill, and some loose coins. When I left the store, shaking, I realized that those 50 reais were all I had left at that moment. When I got home, I called Raphael. He answered, annoyed. "Mom, I'm in a meeting." "What is it, son?" "My card didn't go through at the store. They said there's a problem with the account. Can you check that for me?" He sighed loudly, as if I were bothering him. "Mom, I already told you I changed your account to protect you from scams. Let me handle it. You don't understand these things. I'll explain later." Before I could insist, the call ended. It wasn't just the line that dropped. It felt like a door shutting inside me. I didn't know it yet, but he had canceled my account and transferred everything into investments in my name, as he called them. And I, who had worked all my life, was officially down to 50 reais in my pocket and nothing in the bank. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the edge of my bed, holding my bank card in my hand, like it was a part of me that no longer worked. The silence in the apartment felt like it was swallowing me. I looked at the photos of Raphael on the shelf, smiling child, teenager in cap and gown, man in a suit, and one sentence kept echoing in my head: I gave you everything. For the first time, I felt a fear that wasn't just about running out of money. It was the fear of having been used by my own son. Then, on Monday, the landline rang. I barely answer unknown numbers anymore, but that day something made me get up slowly from the chair and walk to the phone on the wall. Hello, Mrs. Lucy. This is the legal department of Company X, where you used to work. We managed to locate you after an old audit. We need to talk about a financial matter in your favor. For a second, I thought it was a scam. Nowadays, everything is a scam, especially aimed at old people. But they knew details about my file, the names of my old bosses, dates, numbers, that no outsider could invent that precisely. What is this about exactly? I asked, suspicious. Unpaid overtime, corrections on benefits, a collective lawsuit that you didn't even know. You were part of. It's a significant amount, Mrs. Lucy. We need you to come in and sign some documents so we can release the check. At that moment, I had no idea how big this significant amount was. I only felt a mix of relief and strangeness. I, who had just discovered I had nothing left in my account, was hearing that the company of my entire life still owed me money. I didn't know it yet, but that call was only the first of several twists that would turn my life upside down. It wasn't just a check, it was a key that would show me who my son really was, and who I had truly been all these years. Now I'm going to tell you what it was like to return to that company after so many years, and the first sign that this money would change much more than just my bank balance. When I hung up the phone, I sat down at the kitchen table and, before thinking about money, my mind ran back to the time when all I had was a worn-out apron, a skinny little boy clinging to my skirt, and unpaid rent knocking at the door. Sometimes people look at a simple old lady like me and think life has always been this small. They have no idea how long a road I had to walk to reach that moment, with an empty account and a son who had more control over my money than I did. When Raphael's father died, it was like someone turned the lights off in our home. He was a bus driver, working overnight shifts, and on one of those trips, he didn't come back. A road accident. I remember the smell of cold coffee on the table, his shirt hanging over the chair, and Raphael asleep in his room, not knowing the world would change before sunrise. That day, looking at my 9-year-old son, I made a silent promise: you will not go hungry. Because of me, I'll find a way. And I did. I accepted any job that came along. Early in the morning, I cleaned a snack bar. In the afternoon, I did office cleaning. At night, I washed glasses in a bar, while my sister-in-law watched Raphael. I came home smelling of grease and bleach, my feet burning. But the moment I saw his notebook open on the table, I remembered why I did it all. Mom, the teacher said I'm good at math. He would say, proud. Then you're going to be even better. My son, study. Your pen is what's going to get you out of this life. It was during one of those cleaning jobs that I overheard two secretaries talking about a job opening at a big company, the same one where I would later spend almost my entire life. They need someone for cleaning. They say it's on the books and comes with meal vouchers, one of them murmured. I kept wiping the counter, but my ears were glued to their conversation. That night, at home, I sat on the bed and took a deep breath. Raphael, if Mom gets this job, maybe we can move out of this damp house that's always molding, you know? He smiled. That smile that always seemed bigger than his face. I trust you, Mom. I entered the company, terrified of everything. The building was huge, full of glass and important-looking people walking fast. I, in my simple uniform and bucket in hand, became part of the background, but I didn't care about being invisible, as long as my paycheck arrived at the end of the month. Over time, I started helping with other things, paperwork, a bit of computer work. I helped here, helped there, until a manager said, Lucy, you're smart. Want to learn how to handle the paperwork? I learned. It took time. I made mistakes. I cried in the bathroom when they scolded me, but I learned. Little by little, I moved from cleaning into administration. I didn't have a diploma, but I had the hunger to get things right. Every raise I got became a victory for Raphael. When I received my first Christmas bonus, I didn't buy clothes for myself or throw a party. One paid for his school supplies, bought the sneakers he'd been staring at in the shop window, and enrolled him in an English course on installments. He would run to show me his grades, and I kept each report card as if it were a medal. I'm going to make you proud, Mom, he repeated. You already do, my son. Just by being such a good boy and never giving me trouble. When he passed the entrance exam for business administration, I sold my wedding ring, which I had kept for years in a drawer wrapped in a piece of cloth like something sacred. I remembered the weight of the ring in my hand, the feeling that I was betraying my husband's memory. But at the same time, I felt I was turning that gold into something else, our son's future. Are you sure, Lucy? The woman in the jewelry store asked. I'm sure. This has already served its purpose. Now it's my boy's turn. Raphael started college with that look of someone stepping into a new world. In the beginning, he came home excited, telling me about classes, projects, friends. I made coffee, sat in the kitchen, and listened to every detail like I was watching a good soap opera. Over time, though those details started disappearing, he came home tired, locked himself in his room, scrolled on his phone, left the house quickly. Son, want me to heat up dinner? No need, Mom. I already ate with the guys. The guys became a word I didn't know. I knew the names of a few friends, but little by little, it felt like I belonged to another world, older, slower, that he didn't want to show anyone. Even so, I kept sacrificing whatever was necessary. There was a period when the company delayed salaries and cut overtime. I stretched the budget until it almost snapped. I sold my sewing machine, an old stereo, stopped buying meat for months, but his college tuition never once went unpaid. I remembered my father saying, education is an inheritance no one can take, and I wanted to leave that to my son, since I had no other inheritance to give. That was also when I started saving every cent I could to put a down payment on a small apartment in a simple neighborhood, but better than the damp, dark house we lived in. It took years of payments, signatures, and prayers that I wouldn't lose my job. When I finally received the key, I cried so much the doorman asked if I was okay. I'm fine, I said. It's just that I've never had a door that was truly mine. That day, Raphael took a picture with me in the empty living room, hugging me. Mom, this is your victory. I believed him. I thought that apartment would be the place where he would always have a room to come back to, a warm plate of food, and a lap if he ever needed one. Time went by, he graduated, got a job at a good company, started earning more than I had in my entire life. I felt proud, but also strange. The clothes got more expensive, the restaurants, more refined. He started using English expressions, talking about trips and exchanges. I was happy for him, but sometimes I felt like an old piece of furniture in a new fancy living room, still useful, but out of place. I tried to join in. Son, maybe one day you could take me to one of those fancy restaurants you keep talking about. He gave a short laugh. Ah, Mom, those places are crowded. You'd hate it. I'll just bring you something from there. Another day, it's easier. The first signs of distance came disguised as modernity. He said I didn't need to worry about bills, that old people nowadays shouldn't keep cards lying around. Mom, let me take care of everything. I'll put your bills on automatic payment, invest what's left. You just need to live in peace. I saw that as affection. I thought it was sweet that he wanted to take care of me. I sat next to him at the table as he opened his laptop and moved numbers and graphs around. Sign here, Mom. This is just authorization so I can manage your account. I signed. He kissed my forehead. Trust me, okay? One day, though, something bothered me. I was in line at the bank because I still liked to see my statements on paper, that smell of fresh ink, an old people thing. When it was my turn, I asked the clerk, could you print my balance, please? He typed, looked at the screen and said, Mrs. Lucy, you don't have any recent activity here. It looks like your main account was migrated to another type of service, all digital. I didn't understand. Migrated where? It shows here that it's under some kind of management. Maybe your legal representative can explain it better. Legal representative. I had never given anyone power of attorney, at least not in those words. I left the bank holding that paper, but I didn't have the courage to ask Raphael that day. When he came over, in his usual rush, I asked carefully, Son, the bank clerk said my account changed. He didn't even look up from his phone. Yeah, Mom, I already told you. I moved it into a better system. That way you're safer from fraud. Everyone does this now. You don't need to stress about it, okay? His tone wasn't aggressive, but it was impatient, like I was a child asking too many questions. I kept trusting him, like I had my whole life. After all, this was the boy I carried in my arms, who I protected from the rain, whose fever I took care of at night. The boy I watched become a man with my food in his belly and my sweat paying for each step. I couldn't imagine that. Not long after, all those signatures and all those let me take care of it would turn against me. I didn't know that all that effort, the sacrifices, that apartment I considered our safe harbor, would be used as a weapon in the hands of my own son. Now I'm going to show you the first clear sign that something was very wrong, and the first humiliation I suffered inside my own home. After that call from the company, I spent the whole night awake. On one side, the worry about having no money in my account. On the other, that old pending issue that could be my salvation, or just another disappointment. Even so, before I thought about going to the company, I needed to deal with the basics, understand what my own son had done with my money. The next day I called Raphael early. His voice came out sluggish, still in bed. Mom, what is it now? Son, I couldn't use the card at the store, and the bank clerk said my account changed. I've got 50 reais in my wallet and that's it. I need to know what's going on. He was silent for a few seconds, and I could almost hear his irritation growing. Fine, Mom, I'll come by this afternoon. But please, don't panic. You always exaggerate. Exaggerate. That word stayed spinning in my head until he arrived. He walked into my apartment like he owned the place. He barely looked at me, went straight to the kitchen table, opened his laptop, took the card from my hand without asking. I stood there, at the edge of the table, as if I were in the way. Sit down, Mom, he said, with no affection in his voice. Let's put some order in this mess. A mess. Raphael, I've always paid everything on time. He huffed and started typing. Mom, you don't get it. Nowadays money needs to be protected. You leave your card in your purse. You write the PIN on little pieces of paper. Anyone can grab it. I cancelled your old account and put everything into one system, with me. I felt the ground shift under my feet. What do you mean, everything with you? He turned the laptop toward me, like he was showing off a trophy. Look, your pension is deposited into this account I manage. I already invest part of it, pay the regular bills, set aside some savings. You don't need to mess with any of that. But what about me? You get an amount in cash. That's it. I transfer a fixed amount to your savings every month, the one you barely use. You don't need that much money, Mom. Having full access is dangerous. I braced my hands on the table. So I worked 40 years, and now you decide how much I can spend. He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a little mocking. Oh, Mom, stop with the drama. I'm protecting you. You almost fell for that fake bank call. Remember? Imagine if you had more money at hand. That story was true. Once someone had tried to scam me over the phone, but I'd hung up before saying anything. Even so, he used that as a weapon. It wasn't about me being confused. It was about painting me as irresponsible, as someone who couldn't handle her own hard-earned money. Raphael, I never asked you to do it like this, I said, feeling my throat tighten. You took my access away without explaining. I did explain. You just don't pay attention. He was speaking too loudly, like he was scolding an employee. Then the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor from apartment 302, Mrs. Irene, who often came by to borrow sugar or coffee and chat a bit. Oh, Lucy, sorry to bother. Before I could answer, Raphael was already at the door, opening it with a ready smile for the audience. Mrs. Irene, how are you? Come in, come in. I'm here trying to organize my mother's finances, because honestly, on her own she can't handle anything. My face burned. Mrs. Irene smiled awkwardly. Oh, but she's always been so responsible with her bills. Ah, Mrs. Irene, you don't know the half of it, he went on, leaning back in his chair like he was on stage. The other day she almost paid the same bill twice. If I don't step in, she hands her card to anyone. Good thing I took over. Now she gets an allowance and that's it. Allowance. He used that word. I, who always prided myself on paying every bill with my name on it, became, in my own son's mouth, a disorganized old woman who needed an allowance. My neighbor looked at me with pity, and I wanted to sink into the floor. Raphael, please, I murmured. You don't need to talk like that, he shrugged. Oh, Mom, I'm just being honest. If you'd listened to me earlier, you wouldn't have had trouble at the store. That was the first clear humiliation. It wasn't a slap or a scream. It was being cut down in front of others, turning my life of sacrifice into a story of incompetence to manage what I had built. A few days later, he insisted I go with him to the bank to sort out the bureaucratic part. I didn't want to, but without access to my account, I had no choice. When we got there, the icy air from the air conditioning made me shiver more than usual. We sat across from the air manager, a well-dressed young man in a tight tie. Good afternoon, Mrs. Lucy, he greeted, looking more at Raphael than at me. You're her financial representative, correct? I opened my mouth, but Raphael spoke first. That's right, I'm her representative. My mother is great, but she gets too emotional about money. She buys things for others, lends money, and then forgets. I'm managing everything to guarantee her future. The manager nodded, as if that story made perfect sense. I understand. So let's formalize a full power of attorney for you, Raphael. From now on, any complex transaction will go through you. Okay. He pushed a pile of papers toward me. I tried to read the beginning of one of them. The letters danced on the page. I'd like to understand. I started. Raphael sighed, dramatically. Mom, it's the same thing I already do. Now it just becomes official. It's safer for you. The bank requires it. Safer for whom? I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. I signed. I signed because I was embarrassed, because the manager looked at me like I was a difficult client, because my son had put me there as a problem to be solved. When I handed the pen back, the manager smiled. You can relax, Mrs. Lucy. Your son is taking very good care of you. I forced a smile. Inside, I felt myself shrink. On the way out, on the sidewalk, I finally found the courage. Raphael, you know I've always been responsible with money. I don't waste it on nonsense. Never did. He shoved his hands into his pockets. Mom, the world has changed. You're good, but naive. I'm not going to apologize for doing things the right way. And if I want to buy something big, decide to travel, fix up the apartment, you ask me, and I'll see if it fits the plan. Simple. Ask. I would have to ask my own son for permission to use the money my tired body had earned. That hurt more than seeing a zero balance. From that day on, things got more aggressive. He started showing up with seemingly innocent comments that were actually full of poison. Stop buying too much food, Mom. I'll start sending you the exact amount for groceries, so you don't waste anything. This old sofa could be sold, you know. We could invest that money. It's not like you get visitors. If we sell this apartment quickly, it makes a good down payment on a smaller place. You don't need so much space. A smaller place. I knew what that meant. Me shrinking so his world could grow. Little by little I realized he wasn't just organizing my life. He was fitting me into a plan I didn't know, where I was a controlled piece and never the one in charge. That night, after we got back from the bank, I sat alone in the dark living room, looking at the document that said, in cold letters, that my son had full power over everything I had spent decades building. As I turned the pages, I heard my phone ring again in the kitchen. It was the company's number. Mrs. Lucy, can you confirm you'll be coming tomorrow to finalize the settlement? I took a deep breath. Yes, I'll be there. I didn't know it yet, but the money they were offering would expose the real Raphael in a way he himself couldn't imagine, because if he was already humiliating me without knowing anything, you can imagine what happened when he found out I had a check in my hands, a check capable of turning the whole game around. Now I'm going to tell you what it was like to return to the company, what they revealed about my past, and the first major twist I never could have imagined. On the day I was supposed to go to the company, I woke up before the alarm. The sky was still a little dark, and the silence in the apartment felt bigger than usual. I put on my best clothes, that blue blouse I used to wear at the company year-end parties, and a lipstick that was almost finished. I looked in the mirror and, for a moment, I saw the Lucy from 40 years ago, insecure, walking into that company for the first time. Only now, I was going back. As a retiree with an almost empty wallet and a son who had taken control of my money, I got on the crowded bus, holding my purse tightly in my lap. Every corner I recognized tightened my chest. When I got off in front of the big glass building, my legs shook. The security guard at the front desk wasn't the same anymore. I showed my ID and explained. I got a call from the legal department. It's about an old settlement. He typed something, glanced at the screen, then smiled. Ah, yes, Mrs. Lucy, you can go up. Room 805. The elevator climbed slowly, as if it were also carrying all my memories. Rushed coffees, hallway conversations, running to punch the time clock. When the doors opened, I saw a different corridor, with new signs and faces I didn't know. I knocked on the glass door, marked legal, and heard a come in from inside. A young woman with glasses and a tight bun greeted me with a firm handshake. You must be Mrs. Lucy, right? I'm Paula from the legal department. Please, have a seat. I sat down, adjusting my purse on my lap. The air conditioning was cold on my back. Mrs. Lucy, you were part of a collective labor lawsuit a few years ago. The company settled, but there was a lot of trouble getting in touch with former employees. Only now, we've finished all the calculations. I didn't even know I was in this lawsuit, I said softly. Yes, many didn't. Some of your former coworkers added your name when they saw there were irregularities in overtime and some benefits. She pulled out a thick folder full of papers. She turned her monitor slightly toward me and started explaining numbers, interest, and corrections. To me, it sounded like another language, until she took a breath and said, in short, Mrs. Lucy, the net amount you're owed is this. She pointed to a big number on the screen. It took me a while to understand how many zeros it had. I read it out loud, almost not believing. 487,000 reais. She nodded. That's correct. For a few seconds I couldn't hear the air conditioning or the ringing phone in the next room. All I could think of was my almost empty fridge, my declined card, and the crumpled 50 reais in my wallet. 487,000 reais. More money than I had ever had in my entire life. I felt an almost childlike urge to cry, to laugh, to hug someone, but I held it in. Is this certain? No mistake. It's all here, documented. And I'll say one more thing. If the company had paid everything correctly at the time, you could have had a much more comfortable old age. She said it like a casual comment, but her words cut deep. All those years counting food, having the power cut off, buying medicine in installments, and there was money waiting for me, and I never knew. And what do I need to do to receive it? I asked, in a low voice. You'll sign these documents, update some bank details, and in a few days the check or transfer is released. She flipped through the folder and added, almost as an afterthought, oh, I see here that some months ago we were contacted by a relative of yours asking about this case. A man named Raphael. That's your son, right? My heart jolted. You were contacted by my son. Yes, he sent emails, called asking about a possible settlement for former employees, but at the time the calculations weren't finished yet. After that, we never heard back, so we decided to contact you directly. I stared at her, unable to answer. Raphael had never said a word to me about this, not once, and now I was finding out he knew something before I did. Did he mention anything to you? She asked. No, I answered, my voice barely there. He never did. She went on explaining the procedures, but my mind couldn't keep up. Half of me was thrilled at the idea of finally having enough for a dignified old age. The other half was connecting all the dots. My son handling my accounts, canceling my old account, giving me an allowance, and now this contact he had with the company behind my back. I signed the papers, took my copies, and thanked her. Before I left, she added, it's a large amount, Mrs. Lucy. It's very important that you be careful. Find someone you truly trust to help you manage this money, so no one takes advantage of you. I gave a sad smile. People taking advantage. That's exactly what I'm most afraid of. I left the company hugging that folder to my chest. At the bus stop, I watched people rushing by, not realizing that in the middle of that city there was an old woman carrying almost 500,000 in possibilities in her hands, and an abyss waiting for her at home. When I got to my building, Mrs. Irene was by the front desk, talking to the doorman. So, Lucy, how did it go at the company? She asked, curious. Your son told me the other day it was just some delayed paperwork. My son told me. So he had mentioned it to her, but to me, nothing. It was a labor settlement, I answered, avoiding her eyes. Thank God you have Raphael to help you. Right, she added. There's so much complicated stuff nowadays. It's good to have a young person taking care of it. Right there I felt the isolation closing in. To everyone else, Raphael was the perfect son, taking care of his elderly mother, solving everything. If I said anything, I'd look ungrateful, hysterical, the mother who criticizes the son who sacrifices himself for her. I went up, made a weak coffee, put the folder on the table and stared at all those numbers and stamps. When Raphael arrived in the early evening, I was still there, lost in thought. He walked in without knocking, like always. So, Mom, how did it go? He asked, dropping his backpack on the couch. It was more than I expected, I said. The company owes me a lot of money. Raphael, a lot. His eyebrows shot up. For the first time in days, he seemed genuinely interested. How much? Almost 500,000. His eyes lit up. It was quick, but I saw it. It wasn't just surprise, it was calculation. 500,000, he repeated, coming closer to the table. Let me see those papers. He took the folder without asking and started flipping through as if they were his documents. I knew there could be something like this, he muttered. That's why I started looking into some old lawsuits. You knew? I swallowed hard. Why didn't you tell me? He shrugged. There was nothing certain yet. Why worry you for nothing? I was trying to sort things out. First, again, the speech about protecting me. Again, I was being treated like someone who couldn't handle the truth. Raphael, this money is the result of years I worked for free for them. My hours are in there. I want to be able to decide what to do with it. He shut the folder firmly. Nobody's taking that away from you, Mom. But let's be honest, you don't understand investments, you don't understand scams, you don't understand any of this. If you keep this money loose, relatives, neighbors, the pastor, everyone will come asking for help, and you'll give it. I know you. His words were sharp, but his tone was calm. To calm. I just want access to what's mine, I insisted. That's all. He took a deep breath, as if holding his patience. Mom, it's unbelievable. If I don't do anything, you say I've abandoned you. If I do something, you say I'm controlling you. You're never satisfied. I'm trying to make sure you don't end up old and broke, and I'm still the villain of the story. Now, I wasn't crazy. I was ungrateful. I was unfair. I was turning his care into oppression. It was another way of twisting reality, making me doubt myself. In the following days, the pressure tightened. He started showing up more often, not out of affection, but control. Give me your wallet, Mom. I'll keep your card. It's safer. Let me hold on to your ID and your taxpayer card. If you lose them, it's such a headache. Don't sign anything else without showing me first. Agreed. When I said I didn't like any of that, he would call a financial advisor friend on speaker, someone I had never met. Tell her, man, Raphael would say. Isn't it risky for someone her age to manage a large amount on her own? On the other end of the line, a male voice would confirm. It's definitely better to have a responsible person handling it. Saves a lot of trouble. I listened and felt a knot in my throat. It wasn't doctors saying I wasn't lucid. It was specialists saying I wasn't capable. And that hurt in a different way. At church, things weren't any different. When I mentioned, vaguely, that I would be getting some money from the company, one of the ladies smiled. What a blessing, Lucy. And thank goodness Raphael is so responsible. There are so many abandoned mothers out there. You're lucky. Lucky. That word sounded like pure irony. No one could see how much I was shrinking inside my own life. One afternoon, I came home and felt something off. I went to the bedroom where I kept my important things. The drawer where I kept my documents was locked. I never locked it. I went to the little pot in the kitchen where I kept keys. Empty. I grabbed the phone and called Raphael's son. Did you go through my drawer? Yeah, I did. It was a mess, Mom. I took all the important documents and brought them here. Brought them where? To my place. I've got a safe there. Here anyone can break in. You should be thanking me for taking care of it. I felt my legs go weak. Raphael, you can't just take my documents without telling me. He gave a short laugh. My God, Mom, you make drama out of everything. I did the right thing. If you keep making a fuss about everything, honestly, I don't know what else to do. I'm already wearing myself out too much because of you. I hung up with my hand shaking. I went back to the kitchen table where I had left the folder from the company. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. On one of the pages, at the bottom, there was a note about a previous contact attempt. The date was almost a year earlier, long before the call I'd received. Next to it was a phone number that wasn't mine, and an email written by hand. Contact, Raphael.Lucia, followed by an address I didn't recognize, but I knew whose it was. I sat down, gripping that paper tightly, and for the first time, the question wasn't whether I was being unfair to my son. The question was, what exactly is he hiding from me? And that was the moment when something in those papers changed everything inside me. Now, I'm going to show you what I found in that paperwork, and how it became the clue that revealed my son's plan against me. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, with all those papers spread out in front of me, and the phone still warm from my call with Raphael. Outside, I could hear traffic, my neighbor yelling at her grandson, life going on as usual. Inside me, it felt like someone had pulled the handbrake on my life. I stopped looking at those documents like a tired old woman who just signs where she's told. I started looking like someone who needed to truly understand what was being done with her story. I opened the company folder again, slowly. On one of the documents, there was a page titled, Contact Attempts History. There it was, a phone number that wasn't mine, a date from nearly a year ago, and Raphael's name written there, in some legal assistant's handwriting. Underneath a note, relative states he is organizing his mother's finances, requests to be informed when the calculation is ready. It could have seemed normal, children help their parents, right? But what bothered me was the silence. If he already knew there might be a settlement, why didn't he tell me? I kept flipping pages. Then I saw something that made my heart race. A bank details, update form, my full name, ID, address, and below it, an account number that wasn't mine. The account holder's name, Rafael Souza Almeida. My blood ran cold. There was a stamp at the bottom, not processed, pending confirmation from the holder, and a handwritten note, contact not confirmed. Keep original ex-employee banking details. In other words, at some point, someone tried to direct the money that belonged to me into an account in his own name, not a joint account. Not my account under his management, his account. It only didn't go through because the company insisted on confirming it with me. And he never managed that because he never told me. A sick mix of nausea and rage washed over me. I leaned on the table so I wouldn't fall. He tried. I whispered. He tried to put everything in his own name. Right then, an old memory came back like a fast-forwarded movie. Months earlier, Raphael pacing around my living room with his phone pressed to his ear. No, don't worry, sir, he said. As soon as her company settlement comes through, we'll transfer it to this investment account. Yes, of course the contract will be in my name. I'm the one managing it. She doesn't deal with any of that. At the time, I heard him from a distance, distracted, thinking he was talking about a client, some work thing. Now, putting the pieces together, I realized the client was me. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to breathe. When I looked back down at the papers, I found something else, a printed email attached at the end, probably for the company's records. Dear sirs, this is Raphael, son of former employee Lucy. My mother has no familiarity with financial matters and often gets confused with numbers. I kindly ask that any contact about amounts be made preferably through me so I can advise her. I take full responsibility for managing the funds on her behalf. I read that and it felt like someone had erased my entire life with a sentence. Often gets confused with numbers. Me, who spent years adding cent by cent, who worked miracles with a minimum wage. Me, who who helped people in the office not sign the wrong documents. In my son's words, I was turned into someone incapable, a big child who needed management and guidance. The worst part wasn't just what he wrote, it was the intention. If the company fully bought that version, all it would take was one signature, one oversight, and all that money would go straight into his account. I got up and started pacing around the living room. The floor felt too small for so much anger. I wanted to call him right then and scream, throw everything in his face, but something inside me said don't. If I confronted him without organized proof, without anyone on my side, he'd flip the script, like he always did. He'd say it was a misunderstanding, that I had signed something, that I didn't remember, that I was confused, and once again, I'd be the one exaggerating. I sat down again. I took a clear folder from the drawer and started separating the documents. On one side, everything that showed the amount I was owed. On the other, everything that showed his attempts to insert himself between me and that money. The form with his account, the printed email, the contact note. While I was doing that, another thing I'd been ignoring came to mind. My savings statements. I didn't have the recent ones anymore, but I had kept several older ones I'd printed at the bank over the years. I took out a blue plastic folder where I kept those papers, sat on the couch, and started comparing dates. A pattern emerged. In some months, money I was sure I hadn't touched simply vanished. Withdrawals at times when I knew I was at home or at church, probably through the apps he loved so much. Small sums, here and there, as if someone was digging a hole with a spoon to keep it from being noticed. You've been eating away at my money, little by little, I muttered, eyes burning, as if I would never notice. Then one detail caught my eye. On one statement, there was a transfer with the description, Raphael Investment Account, aggressive profile. I had never authorized anything like that, never signed a contract with any broker. The only explanation was painfully clear. He was using my money as if it were his, taking risks and building his own comfort on top of my vulnerability. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping those papers so tightly they almost tore, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't cry, not then. The tears came easily nowadays, but something else rose up instead. A strange calm, a cold certainty. Before, I saw him as a bit clumsy, maybe thoughtless. Now I saw what he had really become, someone capable of erasing his own mother from the path of the money, as if I were an obstacle to be removed and not the source of everything. That night, I decided I wouldn't tell him I had discovered anything, not yet. I hid the most important copies inside the cover of an old recipe book no one ever touched, and put it back on the shelf. Then I sat on my bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to think of someone in this world I could trust. The first person who came to mind was Mrs. Irene, but I ruled that out quickly, not because she's bad, but because she talks too much. In 2 days, the whole building would know, and I couldn't risk Raphael finding out that I'd uncovered his plans. I needed someone who understood paperwork, banks, laws. Then I remembered Mr. Helio, a former colleague from the company. He'd worked with the union, always the kind of man who read everything and fought for workers' rights. I had his number written in an old notebook in the little table by the phone. I flipped through it, line by line, until I found Helio Union. I picked up the phone with trembling hands, but not from fear. It was something else. A mixture of courage and shame. Courage to go after the truth. Shame at having to say out loud that my own son might be using me. I dialed. It rang a few times before a hoarse voice answered. Hello, Mr. Helio. It's Lucy. Do you remember me? From the admin department. The one always buried in spreadsheets. He laughed. A real laugh. The kind that carries good memories. Lucy. Of course I remember. How are you? I swallowed the lump in my throat. I need help. The company called me about a settlement, but some strange things are happening. Could you hear me out? His tone changed immediately, turning serious. I can, and I should. No one steps on a worker's rights. Can you come down to the union tomorrow? We'll go through everything calmly. I hung up, feeling that, for the first time in a long while, I wasn't completely alone. Still, that night I barely slept. I kept imagining what we'd find when someone who truly understood these things looked at those papers. If I was wrong, it would be humiliating. But if I was right, I needed certainty. Certified, stamped, undeniable certainty. Not just for me, but for anyone who might dare question what I went through. That's when I decided I would stop trying to figure everything out on my own. I was going to put those documents in the hands of someone who knew the difference between a mistake and a plan. I was going to get help. And without knowing it, I was about to meet the ally who would turn the game in my favor. Now I'm going to tell you who walked into my life at that moment, and how he proved, in black and white, the plan my own son had built behind my back. The next day I woke up feeling like I'd been beaten, even though nobody had laid a hand on me. The bruises weren't on my body, they were inside. I took a quick shower, tied my hair back as neatly as I could, put on the same blue blouse I'd worn to the company, took the folder under my arm, and headed to the Union. The Union building wasn't as pretty as the company's, but it had something that place never did: the smell of ordinary people, worn floors, a noisy fan, fresh coffee brewing. As soon as I walked in, I saw Mr. Helio, older, much balder, but with the same sharp gaze. He smiled, and came to hug me. "Lucy, look at you. How many years, woman?" "Too many," I said, trying to smile. "And it looks like I've got problems piled up too." We sat in a simple room, at a scratched wooden table. He crossed his arms. "Tell me everything from the beginning." I took a deep breath and started. I told him about the company's call, the settlement, the amount. I told him about Raphael handling my accounts, canceling my old one, giving me an allowance. I told him about the paperwork I found, the email, the attempt to change my bank details. As I spoke, his expression shifted from surprise to indignation. "Let me see those documents," he said. I handed him the folder. He put his glasses on the tip of his nose and read every line, the way I'd watched him read contracts at the company. When he reached the page with Raphael's account number, he tapped it with his finger. "Here, this is serious. They tried to put your son's account down as the destination for the lawsuit money. Tried, but didn't succeed." "Right?" I asked, afraid of his answer. "They didn't. Thanks to this note," he pointed at the scribbled comment. "The legal department did the right thing and required your confirmation. But your son never told you. Lucy, this has a name: misappropriation in progress." I swallowed hard. He kept reading, and found the printed email, then read it out loud. "My mother has no familiarity with financial matters," he snorted. "Lucy, you worked with paperwork for years. Anyone who knows you understand more of this than many managers." My eyes filled with tears, and I believed him. I whispered, "I thought he was just protecting me." He leaned forward. "Protecting is one thing. Taking someone's autonomy away is another. And from what I'm seeing, Raphael crossed that line a long time ago. You cannot face this alone. I'm going to bring someone in who'll help you, properly." He left and came back with a woman in her 40s, dark hair pulled back, a firm look in her eyes. "Lucy, this is Marina. She's a union lawyer, specializes in labor cases, and also elder rights. If anyone can set this straight, it's her." She shook my hand, firm and respectful. "Mrs. Lucy Helios told me a little. May I look at your documents?" "Of course, dear. Look at everything, please." She went through the papers slowly, jotting notes on a blank sheet. Sometimes she frowned, sometimes she nodded in disapproval. "The company did the right thing by keeping the money in your name," she said. "The danger here isn't the company, it's the people around you." She picked up my old savings statement. "Do you authorize me to request, in writing, a full account history from your bank for the last few years? I want everything. Transfers, loans, investments, digital contracts." "I do," I replied immediately. "I also want to check for any power of attorney registered at a notary giving your son extra powers. Sometimes people sign thinking it's one thing and end up with something completely different. Do you remember going to a notary with him?" "Once, yes." I dug through my memory. "He said it was just to update my signature for the bank." I was in a hurry, signed in front of the clerk, and left. She exchanged a quick look with Helio. "Right. We'll see what else was updated that day." She drafted some documents right there. Authorizations, requests, formal letters. She explained each one carefully, line by line. "I'm not going to ask you to sign anything without explaining it first, okay?" she said, looking me in the eye. "And if you have questions, ask. This is your life, not just paperwork." Inside, I wanted to hug that woman. For the first time in a long time, someone was treating me like an adult again. In the following days, Marina went after everything. I kept going back to the Union, drinking coffee with Helio, waiting for answers. About a week later, she arrived with a new folder, even thicker than mine. "Sit down, Mrs. Lucy. Today I have some answers for you." My heart sped up. She started with the detailed bank statements. "First, the money taken from your savings. Over the last 2 years, your son made several transfers from your account to an investment account in his name, not yours. These are not investments for you. They're investments for him. If they profit, the gain is his. If they lose, the base money came from you." My stomach turned. "How much, roughly?" She flipped a few pages. "In total, more than 80,000 reais. 80,000. I thought of the times I hadn't bought meat, hadn't paid for a private doctor's visit, hadn't replaced my sunken mattress. 80,000 disappearing into aggressive investments. There's more," she went on. "We found a payroll loan taken out in your name about a year ago. The installments are being deducted directly from your pension." "A loan?" I almost shouted. "I never asked for any loan." "I know." According to the records, it was contracted by app, using a digital signature created in your ID number. And, guess what? The amount of that loan was transferred on the same day to the same account of Raphael's. I grabbed the edge of the table, so he took a loan in my name, has the money invested under his name, and I'm the one with the reduced pension. Exactly, she said plainly. That's fraud, misappropriation, and depending on what else we find, even fraud on a higher level. She sighed. Now here's the part that upset me the most. At the notary, we found a recent public power of attorney. In this document, you supposedly authorize Raphael to sell your apartment, sign real estate contracts, receive keys, collect sale proceeds, all without you being there. My whole body went cold. Sell my apartment. This power of attorney, if used, would allow him to put your place on the market and receive the money. The only thing that stalled so far was that the real estate agency Heatson contacted required your physical presence to sign the final proposal. We even have an email he sent to a realtor. She pulled out a printed page. Listen to this part. She read slowly. As soon as my mother's company settlement comes through and we close the sale of her apartment, I'll be able to clear my debts and invest in a bigger place in my name. My mother doesn't mind moving somewhere smaller. She doesn't even use the whole apartment. I felt a lump in my throat so big I could barely breathe. His plan wasn't just about the settlement money. It was about everything. My pension, my apartment, my home, my entire life turned into currency for his problems. And where was he going to put me? I asked, almost voiceless. According to a note from the realtor, he mentioned placing you in a simple residential home with caregivers so he wouldn't have to worry. He didn't mention dementia or anything like that. But in practice, you'd be moved into a small room, far from everything that's yours, with no money left, depending on him for every little thing. No one was calling me crazy. They were describing me as a burden to be moved out of the way, a logistical problem. Tears started falling. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, angry at myself for crying. Marina put her hand over mine. Mrs. Lucy, you are not the only one. Many sons and daughters are doing this nowadays, but you're one of the few who still has time to change the outcome before it's too late. Change it how? I asked, swallowing my tears. She was direct. First, we'll block any attempt to touch your apartment. I'm sending a notice to the notary and the real estate agency right now, informing them that you revoke any previous authorization to sell and that any future sale will only be valid if you are physically present with your original ID, she wrote, printed, showed me, and asked for my signature. Second, we're going to open a new bank account at another bank, only in your name, with a PIN only you know. The company will be officially informed that the settlement money can only be deposited into that account and that your son does not represent you in matters related to receiving these funds. I felt a spark of hope, so the money can go directly to me, without going through him. Yes, and that's exactly what's going to happen, she went on. Third, we're going to formalize a report. It's not simple. I know it hurts to think about filing a complaint against your own son, but, at least for now, we'll assemble a full dossier. Statements, loan records, messages, the power of attorney. If he pushes you too far, you'll have legal protection. I took a deep breath. That was another kind of pain. The pain of admitting, on paper, that my son wasn't just ungrateful. He was someone willing to step over me for money. And lastly, she said, I'd suggest you start thinking about what you want to do with this money once it's in your account, calmly, without telling him yet. There are ways to protect your assets with clauses, wills, contracts, that guarantee you keep control while you're alive, and that no one can simply take everything. As she spoke, an idea started to grow inside me, quiet, but stubborn. For the first time, I could use money as protection, not as a trap. I could make it very clear that a son's love cannot be bought with a check, and that respect is not something you negotiate away with a power of attorney. Helio, who had been just watching until then, crossed his arms and added, Lucy, I know you. I know your heart is soft, that you always find a way to excuse people, but this has gone way past any limit. I know, I answered, firm for the first time. And that's why I'm not going to tell him anything. Not yet. Marina looked at me, curious. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Raphael only understands one language, numbers and appearances. He likes the stage, likes to look like the perfect son, likes to talk about planning in front of people. So, I'm going to choose the stage he least expects, and, when everything is ready, I'll show everyone who he really is, and who I am. I left the union with a different posture. It still hurt, it was still heavy, but I wasn't lost anymore. I had proof, I had allies, and, most of all, I had a plan. In the following days, I followed every instruction Marina gave me. I opened a new account, at a bank Raphael didn't use, with a PIN only, I knew, and I didn't write it down anywhere. I went back to the company with a union letter in hand, asking that the settlement be deposited exclusively into that account. I signed the revocation of the power of attorney at the notary, and, in silence, I began to think about the perfect setting for the truth to explode. That's when Raphael showed up one day with news. Mom, I'm organizing a dinner to celebrate my new position at the company, he announced, full of himself. I want to do it here in your apartment. You know, family, a few friends, my boss. It's going to be nice. In that very moment, I understood. There was my stage. He wanted to show the world he was the successful son who takes care of his mother. I gave a slight smile. Of course, son. This is your home. I mean, our home. You can do it. While he talked about dinner plans, I was thinking only one thing. By then, the company's money would already be in my new account. And he had no idea. By that time, I knew everything. I knew about the loans, the investments, the attempt to sell my apartment, the plan to tuck me away in some random nursing home, and they had no idea I had found it all out. Now I'm going to tell you how I quietly prepared the day when all the truth would come out, right in the middle of the party where my son thought he would be the one being applauded. A few days after that meeting at the union, what Marina had predicted actually happened. The money dropped. I remember the sound of the ATM printing the statement like it was now. The paper slid out, slowly, and my hands were shaking so much, I almost tore it. When I looked at the balance, I'd had to blink twice, 3 times. The amount was no longer almost $500,000. With corrections, interest, and a difference the company recognized at the last minute, there was now more than 700,000 reais in my name. 700,000. The woman who, a week earlier, had 50 reais in her wallet and an almost empty fridge, was now staring at that huge number on the cold bank screen. I didn't cry there. I didn't scream. I just felt a wave of silence inside me. Raphael had no idea. And, for the first time in my life, I decided he would not be the first to know. I left the bank and went straight to Marina's office, the statement folded into the pocket of my coat. She greeted me with that same firm manner as always. So, did it go through? I handed her the paper. She looked at it, raised her eyebrows. It did, and it came higher than expected. Great, that makes you even stronger. We sat down, drank some bitter coffee, and she spread the documents on the table like she was putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Mrs. Lucy, now we need to think about 2 things. Protecting this money from any attempt by your son, and deciding when you want him to find out that he's no longer in charge of anything. I took a deep breath. He scheduled a dinner at my place to celebrate his promotion. He's bringing his boss, friends, the neighbor will hear about it. Everyone will know. He loves a stage. And what do you want to do on that stage? She asked, direct. I looked out the window, thinking of my whole life. I want to tell the truth in front of everyone, not shouting, not screaming, calmly, document by document. I want him to know, looking me in the eye, that I know everything, that I'm no longer the mother who signs whatever they put in front of her, and that the money he wants so badly will never again be in his hands. She nodded slowly. Then let's prepare the ground. In the next hours, we did 2 more important things, both hidden from Raphael. First, I made a will. Simple, but clear. It guaranteed he'd only receive the legal minimum he's entitled to, and the rest I already assigned with protective clauses. Part 2, a social project. For seniors I'd always supported, another part locked in investments with very clear rules, with no possibility of him touching it while I'm alive. I signed it with a strange feeling. It was as if I was finally writing my own version of the story, instead of letting him write it for me. Second, Marina assembled a dossier, a thick stack of pages, each one numbered, with copies of statements, emails, powers of attorney, loans. On the front, a simple title, Lucy's financial situation, misuse by third parties. Lucy, this is your weapon, she said, sliding the folder towards me. Today I'll keep quiet. I won't introduce myself as your lawyer unless it's needed. I'll come as your old friend Helio will come too. If things get out of control, we'll be there. I smiled sideways. This will be the first party where Raphael won't be the only one with something up his sleeve. In the days leading up to the dinner, I stepped into the role he expected, the helpful mother, worried about getting everything ready just the way he likes it. I woke up early to clean the apartment. I scrubbed the floors until the smell of disinfectant filled the living room. I dusted the picture frames, including those where he was still a little boy, an irony that didn't go unnoticed by me. I cooked what I knew how to make well, fluffy rice, well seasoned for Rafa, roast chicken with the smell of garlic spreading through the house, a caramel flan that had become a tradition in the few parties I ever threw. While I stirred the pots, I felt the hot steam on my face. Inside, I was cold, determined. With every pinch of seasoning I threw in, I remembered a piece of paper inside that folder. With every dish I put on the table, I remembered a loan installment deducted from my pension. It was as if that dinner were seasoned with everything: love, hurt, strength. Raphael arrived early, carrying bags of drinks and some modern decorations. He walked in without knocking, as always. Wow, Mom, at least you really cleaned up this time, he commented, looking around. The living room even looks bigger. I bit my tongue. I did the best I could. You said it was an important dinner. It is. My boss is coming. I want him to see that even though I came from nothing, I handle everything. Work, family, responsibility. Do you have any idea how many guys at the company put their parents in homes and never look back? I'm different. I swallowed hard. Different. If I had taken just a few more months to realize what was happening, I could have been exactly in one of those places he criticized so much, not because of illness, but out of convenience. He started fussing with the details. He dragged the table to the center of the room, moved the chairs around, set out glasses. He opened my old curtains with a look of disgust. We'll change these later. Okay. With the money from the new apartment, we can do everything properly. New apartment for who? I asked, looking straight at him. He gave a quick smile. For both of us, of course, but let me handle it. You get too nervous when we talk about moving. If he only knew the apartment was already protected, the power of attorney revoked, a will in place saying he was no longer the owner of my future, he wouldn't speak so confidently. When the first guests arrived, the smell of food already filled the hallway. Mrs. Irene was the first, curious as always, bringing a simple cake. Oh, Lucy, your home is going to be so fancy today, huh? Promotion dinner is another level. Raphael showed up at the door, hugging her. Your family, Mrs. Irene. My mom really needed some life back in here. She was way too alone, you know. Now I'm bringing life back into this house. I just watched. Soon two co-workers arrived, laughing loudly, talking about targets, trips, business. Then the boss, a serious man in a dark suit, the type who sizes people up with a glance. Raphael greeted him at the door like he was stepping onto a stage. Mr. Marcello, welcome. This is my mother, the one responsible for everything I am. He shook my hand politely. You must be proud of the son you have. Very committed, dedicated, always says everything he does is for you. I gave a small smile. He talks a lot, doesn't he? Tonight you might get to know some other sides of our story. He laughed, thinking I was joking. A little later, the doorbell rang again. It was Helio and Marina, neatly dressed but simple. I introduced them as old friends from my company days. Oh, it's good that you have people from that time still around, the boss commented. Shows you left your mark there. I did leave a mark, I replied. I just took too long to understand the price I paid for it. Raphael moved around the room, handing out glasses, turning on soft music from his phone. Through a speaker, a light samba, too cheerful for what was coming. Conversations flowed. Memories from my time at the company, jokes, stories from his current job. I listened quietly, watching every gesture. The folder with my dossier was hidden where only I knew, inside the cabinet of the bookcase, tucked among old domino boxes. I felt its presence like an extra heartbeat in the living room. Every now and then, I exchanged looks with Marina. Without words, she understood I was waiting for the right moment. When everyone had eaten, the dishes were almost empty, and the wine had loosened. Tongues. Raphael tapped his glass lightly, asking for attention. Guys, just a moment, he said, standing. I wanted to say a few words. The room gradually quieted. Even the music seemed to go down. I saw the shine of pride in his eyes. He was on his perfect stage, boss present, friends watching, neighbor emotional, mother at his side as the perfect background prop. He started talking about meritocracy, effort, about how he came from nothing and made it. He spoke of a tough childhood, of his absent father, of his hard-working mother, all true. But in half measures in every detail, he painted himself as the hero who never stopped, caring for his mother, repeating that phrase a little too often. As he spoke, I felt a strange calm spread through my body. It was as if, suddenly, I wasn't crouched in the corner of my own life anymore. I knew that in a few minutes, nothing would be the same. When he raised his glass and said, and to finish, I want to say that everything I've achieved is because of her. She trusts me so much, she even lets me take care of all her finances. I knew it was my moment. It was time for the toast, the speech, the grand announcement he thought he controlled. But what I was going to say in that room wasn't in his script. It was in mine. Now I'm going to tell you exactly what I said, in front of everyone, when I asked to speak that night, and how the very first sentence I spoke made my son begin to lose the ground under his feet. When Raphael finished saying she even lets me take care of all her finances, I felt the air in the room get heavy, the raised glasses, the smiles, everything froze for a second in front of me. I stood up slowly, my knee cracking, but when my voice came out, it came out, firm. Now it's my turn to speak. Everyone turned to me. The music was still playing softly, but I made a small gesture with my hand. Turn that off, please. What I have to say doesn't go with background music. Raphael chuckled, a little uncomfortable. Here comes a proud mom speech. Huh. He tried to joke, but make it quick, Mom. Or, my boss is going to think, for the first time in my life, I cut him off in front of everyone. Your boss is going to think a lot of things tonight, Raphael, and none of them are what you're expecting. An uneasy silence dropped over the room. I saw Mrs. Irene clutch her glass to her chest. Mr. Marcello crossed his arms, curious. Marina and Helio watched me with silent encouragement. I took a breath. My name is Lucy. I worked 40 years at the company that forgot me when it was time to pay what it owed me. I raised this boy alone, selling my wedding ring, working nights, taking extra shifts. Until last week, I had 50 reais in my wallet and a blocked card. I paused. I used to believe that was life's fault. Today, I know it wasn't. It was someone's fault, right here, in this room. I looked straight at Raphael. He forced a smile. Mom, what is this? You're overreacting again, in front of. I'm not overreacting. I cut in again. I'm telling you what happened, and I brought everything in writing so no one can say it's just a mother being dramatic. I walked over to the bookcase, opened the cabinet, took out the thick folder hidden between the domino sets. I walked back slowly, feeling every pair of eyes on me. I laid the folder on the table, next to the empty serving dishes. You see this young man here? I asked, pointing at Raphael, the one who talks so not nicely about responsibility, about taking care of his mother, about being different from the children who dump their parents in homes. Well, he is different. He tried to do worse. His face flushed instantly. Mom, that's enough. Did you take your meds today? He blurted out, laughing nervously. People, she gets like this when she gets too emotional. Don't use my health to shut me up, Raphael, I said. Cold. I'm not confused. Confused is what I was when I thought you were incapable of betraying me. The room seemed to shrink. I opened the folder, took out the first page and held it up. This is a form from the company where I worked my whole life. It has my name, but Raphael's bank details as recipient. He asked for the money from my labor lawsuit to go straight into his account, without telling me anything. I looked at his boss. Mr. Marcelo, did you know your employee spent months trying to receive money that wasn't his? He frowned. No, Mrs. Lucy. I had no idea. Raphael held his hands out, trying to regain control. Mom, that's a misunderstanding. I was just trying to make things easier. Forgetting your keys in the door is a misunderstanding. Raphael, this is called a plan. I picked up another sheet. Here's the email you sent to the legal department saying I get confused with numbers, that it's better to talk to you, me, the woman who stretched minimum wage to pay your college tuition became, in your email, some old lady who can't read a bank statement. I saw one of his colleagues whisper to the other, uncomfortable. I grabbed another bundle of paper, statements. These are my savings statements. For 2 years, part of my money was being transferred little by little to an investment account in Raphael's name. More than 80,000 reais. Without my knowledge, without my authorization. I told you about those investments, he snapped. No smile left. You just forgot. Funny how I forgot. But the bank didn't, I answered, gesturing towards Marina. My lawyer requested the records, every line with CPF, date, time. The person who forgot to tell me anything was you. He looked at Marina, confused. Lawyer. She smiled slightly. Good evening. I'm Marina, the union's attorney and Mrs. Lucy's lawyer. I oversaw the entire audit. Everything she's saying is documented. It was like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. He looked around for support, but no one knew where to put their eyes. I went on. I wasn't about to stop halfway. There's more. I pulled out another paper. This is a payroll loan contract made in my name. I never asked for any loan. But, conveniently, on the very day it was released, the money landed in my son's account. And the installments, well, those are being neatly taken from my pension. Mrs. Irene put a hand to her mouth, shocked. My God, Raphael. He started pacing, sweating. This is all twisted. I was going to explain it to my mother, but she jumps ahead, starts creating theories. I didn't create theories. I finally created courage. I shot back. And the best part is still coming. I slowly took out the copy of the public power of attorney from the notary. That heavy paper. That had almost knocked me down when I first saw it. This is a public power of attorney. In it, I supposedly authorized Raphael to sell my apartment, receive the money, sign everything without me needing to show up. With this paper, he could have left me homeless and pocketed the money. The only thing that stopped it was that the real estate agency required me to be there. I stared deep into his eyes. Tell me, Raphael, which simple residential home were you planning to shove me into after selling my place and taking the company money? He went pale. His boss cleared his throat. Residential home, he asked, confused. Marina calmly filled in the rest. We've got his emails with a realtor, Mr. Marcelo. He talked about paying off personal debts with his mother's money and putting her in a simple home with caregivers so he wouldn't have to worry. What came next wasn't just any silence. It was thick, heavy. Even the music from a nearby apartment sounded like it had stopped. Raphael took a step towards me, hands out. Mom, for God's sake, it was just talk. Things said in the heat of the moment. I would never abandon you. I always handled everything. You handled everything in a way that was very convenient for you, I answered. That ends now. I stood straighter than I had in many years. I came here tonight, to this party you planned to show off what a perfect son you are, to say the script has changed. The company money has already been paid. I reached into my purse and took out a folded envelope. The light in the room caught the edge of the check like a mirror. Here is the check, made out in my name, with the corrected amount. More than 700,000 reais. His eyes locked onto that paper, as if it were the only thing that existed. I went on. It's sitting in a new account, at a bank you don't know, only in my name, with a PIN only I know. You don't control anything that's mine anymore, Raphael. Not my pension, not my home, not my future. He swallowed hard. The caring son mask lay shattered on the floor. But we're family. Mom, you can't do this to me. I was counting on that money. I'm buried in debt. I put a lot of investments in my name that were for both of us. That both of us came out desperate, not affectionate. I gave a sad half smile. You counted on my money a little too much. You counted so much that you tried to erase the part where it was mine. I sighed. I also counted on something, Raphael. I counted on your character. That's where my calculations went wrong. Now each of us is left with what we earned. You with your debts, and me with what's mine by right. He looked around, feeling the judgment in every gaze. The neighbor who had always praised him, the colleagues who admired him, the boss who had taken him as an example. The perfect image he'd built was collapsing right there, between the dish of farofa and the jar of juice. Then I played my last card. Oh, and one more thing. I went back to the folder and took out a smaller sheet. There's already a will on file. In it, I guarantee you'll receive the bare minimum the law forces me to leave you, nothing more. Part of this money goes to a social project that helps abandoned seniors. Another part is locked in investments you can't touch, not even if I die. You're no longer the heir to my silence, only to what the law says. That's when I saw his pride break. His face fell, his shoulders sagged. He staggered a step, closer and stopped less than a meter from me. Mom, his voice came out hoarse. Don't do this to me. For God's sake, don't do. You did it to me first, Raphael, I answered. I'm just putting things back where they belong. He looked again at the check, at the papers, at Marina's steady expression, at his boss's serious face, at the neighbor's tear-filled eyes, and in that moment, the man full of swagger, who thought he owned my life, collapsed. He fell to his knees in front of me. The sound of his knees hitting the cold floor echoed louder than any toast. Forgive me, Mom, he sobbed, clutching the hem of my skirt like he did as a child. I was desperate. I messed up. Give me that check. We'll fix everything. I'll put you in a better place. I swear, I'll change. His tears fell onto my hands, but they didn't wash anything away, because regret that only appears after the money shows up has another name to me, fear. I ran my hand through his hair, not like someone comforting, but like someone saying goodbye to an illusion. I forgive you as a mother, Raphael, so I don't get sick inside. But as a woman, and as the owner of my own life, I won't forget, and I won't put back into your hands the power you used against me. I looked at the guests. Tonight, in this room, everyone is seeing who's who. This isn't gossip. It isn't exaggeration. It isn't some confused old woman. It's facts, numbers, contracts. I'm not destroying anyone's life. I'm just taking my own life back. I gently freed the edge of my skirt from his hands. Get up, Raphael. I'm not the one you need to kneel to. It's your own conscience. And, if you want, the law as well. Because my lawyer already has everything ready. His boss stepped forward, serious. Tomorrow we're going to talk at the company, Raphael. Officially. His colleagues looked away. Mrs. Irene sobbed quietly. When I walked out of that room, leaving my son on his knees, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Not at the company, not in the family, not in my life. The check was safe in my purse, but more than that, something new was safe inside me. The certainty that I would never go back to being a side character in my own story. Now I'm going to tell you what happened to Raphael after that day. What the company did, how the whole building reacted, and how I finally began to rebuild my life with the money in the account and, above all, with my dignity restored. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone on the living room sofa, with the house still, smelling of food and embarrassment, dirty dishes in the sink, half-full glasses, the folder with documents on the table, and silence. The silence after the storm. Raphael had left without looking back. He got up from the floor, face wet, grabbed his jacket, stumbled over his words and practically ran out the door. No kiss on the cheek, no good night, just a we'll talk later, which I already knew meant nothing. The next morning, it seemed like the whole building had woken up before I did. I found Mrs. Irene at the front desk, whispering with another neighbor. When she saw me, she tried to act normal, but couldn't. Lucy, I don't even know what to say, she murmured. I spent my whole life praising Raphael, and last night, I took a deep breath. You don't need to apologize, Mrs. Irene. You weren't the one who lied. He was. She shook her head, sad. If it's any consolation, The entire building now knows you're not the confused old lady he always made you out to be. You were the only adult in that room last night. It still hurt, of course, but at the same time, I could feel a new kind of respect in people's eyes. It wasn't pity. It was something stronger. A little while later, my phone rang. It was Helio. Lucy, I need to update you on something, he said bluntly. Your son didn't show up at the company today, but his boss came here to the union early, wanting to understand the situation better. My heart jumped. And what did you tell him? I told him the truth, that you don't want to destroy anyone's career, but you're also not going to hide what happened. We handed over copies of what involved the company. The rest is between you, your lawyer, and the courts if needed. In the late afternoon, Marina called to Mrs. Lucy. The company has opened an internal investigation. From what I've heard, Raphael will be removed from his position of trust. I don't know if they'll fire him yet, but his image inside the company has changed. I stayed quiet for a few seconds. I didn't want to see my son unemployed. I admitted, but I also can't pretend. Nothing happened. No one here is cheering for anyone's ruin, she replied calmly. We're just putting consequences on top of choices. He chose to use your name and your story as a step ahead. Now he has to learn to walk without stepping on you. A few days later, Raphael finally messaged me for the first time since the dinner. He didn't call. He wrote, Mom, I've been removed from my position. I wasn't fired, but they threw me into a smaller area. No team, no projects. They're treating me like a monster. You got what you wanted. Happy now. I read that message over and over. So many times I knew every word by heart. At first, I felt guilty. It was automatic, almost a reflex. Did I go too far? Could I have handled this privately? But when I closed my eyes, I saw my trembling hand with the bank statement in the kitchen. I saw myself at the pharmacy counting coins. I saw myself at the bank, not understanding why I had no money. Guilt slowly gave way to clarity. I replied in just a few words, I never wanted your downfall, Raphael. I wanted my life back. I still do. What you do with yours now is your choice. He read it. He didn't answer. While his castle was collapsing, mine that had always seemed to be made of sand, started being rebuilt, brick by brick. The first thing I did wasn't to buy a car, travel the world, or change everything at once. No. The first thing I did was something simple. I bought a new mattress, one that didn't sink in the middle, that didn't hurt my back. When the store delivered it, I sat on the edge and cried, quietly. Look at that, Lucy, I said to myself. 40 years to sleep without waking up broken. Then, I fixed up the apartment. I repainted the walls white, swapped the yellowed living room, curtains for lighter ones, bought a decent kitchen table. It wasn't luxury. It was dignity. Every time I chose something, I asked myself, is this to show others, or to serve me? If the answer was for others, I left it at the store. The second thing I did was take care of what no one sees, my mind and my heart. Marina referred me to a psychologist who worked with seniors at a reduced rate. I showed up to the first session not really knowing what to say. I'm afraid of becoming a bitter old woman, was the first sentence that came out of my mouth. She smiled, patient. The fact that you're afraid of that is already a good sign. Tell me your story. And I did. Week after week, I took stones out of my chest. I started to understand that love isn't handing yourself over on a silver platter, that trust isn't signing in blank, that being a mother doesn't mean being the floor for your child to wipe his feet on. At church, I changed my place to I used to sit in the back, quietly. Now I sit closer to the front. One day, the leader of the seniors group asked me, Lucy, would you share your testimony? Without mentioning numbers, of course, but talk about boundaries. There are so many people here going through similar things with their children, grandchildren, nieces. I went up to the small pulpit with sweaty hands. I talked about the basics, how we get used to shrinking ourselves to fit into other people's lives, how hard it is to say no to someone we brought into this world. I didn't name names, didn't mention checks or lawsuits, but when I came down, 3 women hugged me in tears, saying, it felt like you were telling my story. That's when I realized my pain wasn't just mine, and maybe my new beginning could lend courage to others. At the same time, Marina kept handling the cold side of things. She prepared an out-of-court agreement and walked me through every line. You can press criminal charges if you want. You've got grounds. But there's another. Option 2. A tough agreement, with clear clauses. He admits he used your money without authorization, returns part of what he took, pays off the loan made in your name, and signs that he'll never again have access to your accounts or assets. If he breaks it, then we go to court. I took a deep breath, and that protects me. It does. And it gives you a chance not to sever the bond completely, if you don't want to. It was one of the hardest decisions of my life. Part of me wanted to see my son answer for everything, go to jail, repay every cent. Another part still saw the skinny boy in his school, uniform, the teenager showing me his grades, the man who, buried somewhere inside, might still be able to change. In the end, I accepted the agreement, not out of fear, but by choice. I don't want to be the mother who pushed her son into prison, I told Marina. If he ever ends up there, let it be for what he does going forward, not for what we already stopped. Raphael accepted the agreement in silence. The three of us sat in a cold room, me, him, and Marina. He read each clause with a hard expression. At one point he asked, "And if I don't sign, then it goes to court," she answered, blunt. "With everything you already saw your mother has in hand." He signed. He didn't look at me, but when he stood up, he muttered, "I'll pay off the loan. At least that, at least that, at least that," I replied. "The rest, you'll have to pay to your own conscience." While he wrestled with his consequences, I started reinventing myself in small ways. I did something I'd been putting off for years. I enrolled in a free digital literacy class for seniors at the community center. I sat in front of a computer like I was staring at a monster, but by the third class, I could open my own banking app, check my balance, and use a secure password. "See, Mrs. Lucy," the instructor would say, laughing. "Not only do you get numbers, now you get screens too." And I thought if I'd learned this earlier, a lot would have been different. But instead of blaming myself, I chose to be glad I was learning now. Over time, I started doing something I never thought I would, helping at the union, alongside Helio, in a small new project they created. "Lucy, would you come in once a week and talk to other retirees?" he asked. "Tell them what you went through, show them documents, teach them not to sign anything without reading." I said yes, and, before I knew it, I'd become a reference point. Me, the one called confused, now helping others clear things up. As for Raphael, he fell in a way that hurt to watch. Even after everything, he was removed from his position, lost that shine he liked to show off. Some friends disappeared. Girlfriend, who used to post endless perfect couple photos, vanished from the pictures and from his life. The neighbor who used to say your son is such a pride now shook her head and said, "Your son is a serious case." But I realized something over time. The worst fall wasn't financial. It was in front of the mirror. He could no longer look at himself with the same pride. One day, months after the dinner, he showed up at my door. No warning. Thinner, with deep circles under his eyes. I could have slammed the door in his face. Instead, I left it open and walked ahead without inviting him in, without sending him away. He followed. "Mom," he said, stopped in the middle of the living room. "I'm paying off the loan. There's not much left." "I know," I answered. "The lawyer sends me the receipts every month." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm in a smaller department now, making less." Embarrassed, I can't even look my boss in the eye. "But I'm trying." For a moment, the silence grew heavy. "I didn't come to ask for money," he added quickly. "I know those days are over. I just came. I don't even know why." I looked at him carefully. For the first time, I saw a bit of the boy he once was behind the man who had tried to use me. "Maybe you came because, deep down, you know that if you ever want to be a better person, you'll need to start by admitting who you've been," I said. "Not to me, to yourself." He swallowed. He didn't kneel again, didn't cry dramatically like at the dinner, but his voice shook when he said, "I'm trying to learn how to live without treating you like a bank, Mom. That hurts more than you think." "What hurts me is what you've already done," I answered. "But now, I'm busy living. If one day you want to walk beside me as a son, not as the owner of my life, the door is there. It's not wide open, but it's not locked either." He looked at me, unable to tell if this was punishment or mercy. And, for the first time, he bowed his head not from public shame, but from respect. He left without dramatic hugs or big promises, just left to see you, Mom. That sounded less entitled than before. Maybe it was the beginning of something, maybe not. But for the first time, his future didn't define mine. Today, I have a bank account in my name, an apartment in my name, my money protected, but above all, my life in my own name. I make plans. I think about a small trip to finally see the ocean for real. I make lists of books I want to read, of little classes I want to take, gardening, crafts, whatever I feel like. And when I look at everything Raphael lost, his position, his status, his image, I realize that most important part of this story was never his punishment. The most important part was what I gained. Now I'm going to tell you who I became after all this, how I started living, how I learned to love myself without sacrificing myself completely, and what the greatest lesson of this whole story turned out to be. Today, as I tell you this part of the story, it's been almost 2 years since that night when my son fell to his knees in front of me over a check. A lot has changed since then. And strangely, the most important change wasn't in the numbers in my bank account or in my home. It was in the way I see myself when I look in the mirror. I'm still the same Lucy at 68, stubborn white hair, knees that complain on the stairs, hands marked from scrubbing floors and typing papers. But inside, I'm no longer the woman who signed anything they put in front of her for love. Today, I wake up in a room that looks simple, but has something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. My day starts with fresh coffee, fresh bread, and sometimes fruit I buy without guilt. Not because there was a little left over, but because I know that now I decide how much I can spend. I take my little notebook and write down my expenses for the month. Not because I'm afraid of Raphael, but because I've learned to respect my own money. I've built a new routine. Once a week, I go to the union to help other women read contracts, letters from the bank, too good to be true offers. We sit in a small room, cover the table with papers, and I always start the same way. Before you sign anything, remember, if it's really yours, no one needs to hide it from you. They laugh, some cry, some tell stories that sound a lot like mine, and I realize that, without meaning to, I've become the auntie of housewife finances. I have no formal degree, but I have scars, and scars are a kind of education. Another part of my days goes to things I never thought I'd do at this age. I joined a walking group at the park. People my age, some a bit older, some younger. We walk slowly, talk about life, complain about aches, trade doctor recommendations, tea recipes, and, sometimes, we talk about our kids too. At first, I barely mentioned Raphael. Today, when I feel ready, I tell the truth, but without anger. I talk like someone describing a storm that has passed. It destroyed a lot, but it also swept away what no longer belonged there. With the settlement money, I could have bought a bigger apartment in a fancier neighborhood. I could have gone out of my way to prove I had become rich, but I chose to stay where I was, just making my place more comfortable. The only luxury I allowed myself was a little trip that meant the world to me. I went to see the ocean. I stayed in a simple guest house for 2 days. The first time I stepped onto the sand and felt the cold water on my ankles, I cried. Not from missing someone, not from pain. I cried with relief. I spent my whole life working just to pay bills, and only now I'm living a little piece of the dream that was mine, I thought, staring at that horizon with no walls. When I came back, I brought a small jar of sand. I put it on the shelf next to the old photos of Raphael as a child. Not to erase the past, but to remind myself that besides being a mother, I am also a woman, a person, an individual, that my life doesn't begin or end with him. And Raphael, where does he fit into this new phase? He still exists. He's still my son. It still hurts. Sometimes, after the agreement, it took him a while to look me in the eyes again without shrinking. The smaller sector at the company became a sort of silent punishment. His salary went down. The bills hit hard, and for the first time he had to solve his own problems without using my name as a shield. We went months speaking little, mostly short messages. A good morning, Mom here. How's your health? There. At first, it sounded too formal, like he was talking to a stranger. But I understood. Rebuilding also has those hard silences. One day, he asked me out for coffee at the bakery near my place. I was surprised, but I went. He was already there. No suit, no expensive watch, deep eye bags, but a different look, less arrogant. Mom, I'm in therapy, he said, straight away. Oh, you are, I replied, stirring my coffee. About what? About everything. About money, about you, about Dad, about this need I've always had to prove I wasn't poor, at any cost. He sat there quietly for a moment, then went on. Want to know the sentence that hurt the most? When my therapist said, you didn't want to give your mother a better life. You wanted a better life using your mother as a ladder. I didn't say I already knew that. I didn't need to. He'd finally gotten there himself. And what are you doing with that? I asked. Trying to become someone who doesn't only kneel when he sees a check, Mum. He gave a sad half smile. I don't know if you'll ever trust me again, but I wanted you to know I'm at least trying to be a decent man without touching what's yours. I looked at him calmly. Trust isn't like money, Raphael. You can't just give it back and be done. It's rebuilding, brick by brick. And I'm not the one who's going to lay those bricks. You are. He nodded, eyes shining. Today, our relationship is different. He visits without opening drawers, without grabbing papers, without talking about investments. Sometimes he comes just to eat a simple meal, watch a game on TV, ask about my week at the union. It's not perfect. Sometimes, I still see that anxious glint when he talks about money, plans, the future. I also have my moments of fear, of memories, but now I have something I never had before, boundaries. If he brings up something that oversteps, I say no. If he makes a joke about my ability, I shut it down immediately. If he tries to give opinions where he has no place, I say, son, I'm the one who decides here. You take care of your life, I take care of mine. If we're going to walk together, it'll be side by side, not with you on top of me. I learned that saying no is also a way of loving myself first, and, sometimes, loving the other by stopping them from continuing to be the worst version of themselves. Looking back, I see at least 6 big turning points in this story. The phone call from the company when I thought I was broke, finding out my son knew about the money before I did, discovering the transfers and the loan in my name, revoking the power of attorney and the money lending in an account he doesn't control. The night he fell to his knees in my living room, not out of love, but out of fear of losing what was never his. And finally, this quiet shift, me learning that my greatest wealth isn't what the bank displays, it's what I've learned never to let anyone take from me again. Today, if you ask me what the moral of this story is, I'd answer like this: love without boundaries becomes a tool in the hands of someone who doesn't know how to love. Money without clarity becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. Family without respect becomes just a pretty last name decorating betrayal. I learned that a mother is not a safe, not a ladder, not a life insurance policy. A mother is a person, and a person has the right to say enough before she's erased from her own story. If I could speak to any woman listening to me right now, I'd say, don't wait for someone to cancel your account to realize they canceled you from your own life first. Don't wait for a check to show up to discover that the one who always had value was you, not the money. Don't accept being called incapable by someone who's just afraid of losing control over what's yours. Today, I sleep on a comfortable mattress, with a lighter heart, knowing that what I have can be lost, but who I finally am, no one can take away. And that, in the end, was the greatest lesson of my life.